things I love to do, so I thought I would do it again tonight. Not surprisingly, there is yet another book on Abraham Lincoln. 2 volumes, 2,000 pages by Michael Burlingame. If you buy one book, this is the one to buy. I think it's going to be the standard for the next 15, 20 years. Burlingame suggests, as others have, that Lincoln's childhood shaped him greatly, especially his father, Thomas. Young Abraham thought his father was unsuccessful, lazy, lacked ambition, and was anti-intellectual. So he looked elsewhere for role models who displayed the opposite characteristics. As a young man, he greatly admired Henry Clay, the leader of the Whig Party, and Lincoln was elected to the Illinois legislature multiple times and to one term in the U.S. House of Representatives as a Whig. But the times were not kind to the Whigs or their principles, and the party disappeared, and Lincoln had to look somewhere else. As a successful lawyer, he looked to precedent and ultimately to the principles of the Constitution for his views. He took the Founding Fathers generation as his role models and the Constitution as his source of precedent and principle. He personally detested slavery, but he said he could find nothing in the Constitution that permitted its abolition in the states where it then existed. But he did his homework and built an argument that the founding generation had many times regulated the peculiar institution, as it was called, as a condition of admission into the Union, and that the national government could prohibit the extension of slavery into the vast lands of the territories west of the beloved Lincoln's Illinois, as each territory entered the Union. Lincoln had found a bedrock on which he built a personal, social, legal, and political life. It has occurred to me many times, watching all of you over the years, that for many in our culture, the undergraduate years are the time when most of us begin to seriously search for the bedrock upon which to build a life. It is subject to revision, of course, but that bedrock shapes whatever else joins it as bedrock or comes to rest upon it. It is a special time of a life during which much happens, both inside and outside of ourselves, and we have to blend them somehow. Nobody else has ever done this quite the way that each of us does, and nobody else ever will. There is an invitation to look around and consider how the business of becoming a maturing human being, a process which most of us discover never really ends. Those who take advantage of the undergraduate years seek their bedrock are not limited by time or space. Plato retired even before I got here to the hilltop, but he inhabits the place still. Abigail Adams has long since passed, but whenever a young woman looks for a role model, she can look to her as she wrote to her beloved John during the Continental Congress at Philadelphia in March of 1776. Quote, "Dearest friend, I long to hear that you have declared an independency." And then the secret says, "And by the way," and by the way, in the new code of laws, which I suppose it will be necessary for you to make, I desire you would remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors have ever been. End quote. Plato and Abigail Adams, good company, even tonight. As a product of the 1950s and 1960s, I observed massive shifts in every one of the major institutions of American society. Family, education, religion, economics, politics, and government, the legal system, healthcare, and popular culture, the institutions that are found in many different versions in every society, as Richard would know. Because the changes were so powerful and profound, I had to re-examine my bedrock to get me through, it turns out, the next 45 years. I first stepped onto this campus in April of 1969 for a job interview. Because 1969 came after 1968, interesting, I was careful where to look for work. In January of '68, the Tet Offensive signaled that the Vietnam War was probably unwinnable. 6 weeks later, LBJ said he would not seek another term as president. The Friday of that week, Dr. King was assassinated. 2 months later, Robert Kennedy, who had announced it in a ghetto in Indiana, was murdered himself. In August of 1968, the Democratic Party nearly died at Chicago's Michigan Avenue. Rioting, murder, and lies in high places seemed the new normal. After '68 came '69. My formative years unfolded in Madison, Wisconsin, less than a mile from the university campus, which has an unforgettable sense of place. So in looking for work, the first requirement was that it had to have a sense of place. April '69 was my first real visit to Texas, and the expectations in my bedrock at the time led me to expect to run into characters from Giant, tumbling tumbleweed in every street, the Sons of the Pioneers or Pappy O'Daniel and the light crust doughboys humming in the background, John Wayne, the Dealey Plaza, Longhorn Cattle, Charles Whitman, and oversized cowboy hats on every head. Those expectations were not met, but I did find my second unforgettable place of the world with a sense of place so strong that it would physically root me to the earth, a place that belonged precisely where it was and was supposed to be. When my foot hit the ground here that April day, I knew I had found it. I didn't know it at the time, but I came to believe that experience was probably the same for Mary Doyle, Mary Cremont, Father Soren, and the many members of the Holy Cross Order and their associates, faculty, and staff, and probably, eventually, many of you. The second part of my bedrock, in addition to a sense of place, was vision. A vision is a relatively coherent view of how everyday experiences operate and at least some conscious awareness of the values that are the engine that drives daily existence and provides the color and sound in daily life. I had spent the previous 8 years in Dominican communities, Father Wise, that had numbered between 8 or 200, according to a vision articulated a week before Christmas in 1216. We prayed mostly in Latin, read Latin textbooks, listened to lectures and responded in Latin, and took notes and exams in Latin. You'd think question number 1 was a big Most nights I rewrote my Latin notes. In May of 1964, we went off to summer camp on the shores of Lake Michigan with Latin rattling around in our brains. And when we began the fall semester of '64, we began reading the documents of the Second Vatican Council in English with the ink quite literally wet on the pages of the diocesan newspaper. The vision had been renewed, but the bedrock had changed. 4 years later, I returned to Madison to study political science at my then favorite university, just as the anti-war demonstrators began and just as the National Guard with fixed bayonets began checking IDs before anyone could enter a campus building, and the Madison police used tear gas many days for crowd control. I was then a newly ordained Dominican priest in my 20s, but I discovered in classes, hallways, and the street corners of Madison people of many ages who were trying to make sense of their world, and all had a different part of a vision. I went to SDS and other meetings, and we all learned once again that a university is essentially a site for a great conversation across cultures and centuries, languages, literatures, and religions, a conversation about the world around us and the world within us. Both worlds are enormous, fascinating, near infinite, and always changing. I was not alone as I learned to listen well and to say many times, I would like to hear your argument, as they and I sought to build a bedrock. The practice of listening and conversing was already here at St. Edward's in the Holy Cross tradition of hearts and minds. The mind will not be educated at the expense of the heart. There is a deep longing in everyone for a sense of tranquility in which common sense has made a home, furnished with fairness, dignity, and a sense of respect for others and oneself and for others' views. Curiosity is also an almost welcome visitor about the world within, the spiritual life, and the world without, in which we are enmeshed and in which there is so much pain. A tradition of hearts and minds, I learned, is seasoned with a realistic sense of hope about lessening that pain. Hope is stubborn and canny and fearless, and there is reason for hope. When I was a kid, few neighborhoods in this nation got through a summer without at least one child contracting polio. I checked the World Health Organization yesterday about noon, and in 2013, there were 406 recorded cases on the planet. In addition to establishing a bedrock of a sense of place and a vision, there are two more I report as ones that I have found useful. The first one is friendship. Friends cut your pain in half, double your joy, and help chase away the blues. The sole reason for my coming to St. Edward's those many years ago is that my college roommate was here on the faculty, and he called me to tell me there was an opening, and why didn't I come and take a look? And the rest, as they say, is history. Being a friend is a high calling. You can live without a lot of things, but you cannot live well without friends. My bedrock is sense of place, vision, friendship, and finally, laughter. One of my favorite quotations, only three things in life are real: God, human folly, and laughter. The first two are beyond our comprehension, so we must do what we can with the third. Tonight we have done well with the third among friends. And what a pleasure it has been. Thank you.